I'm glad you brought that up about the media, because this is one thing that drives me insane about the right. The right is so fond of saying things like, oh, they're so biased, or imagine if a Republican did this. They're not biased. They're not left. They're not liberal. They're actively hostile against you, and they hate everything you care about. I don't know why we have such a hard time acknowledging this.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And you know, they not only do they not care, or not only do they hate you, but you are an other. You're an other. You're a rube. You're an idiot. And maybe that information is true, but Joe Biden needs to be president because we say so. And with that mentality comes, you know, justifying that behavior, which is lying, obfuscating, curating, and running interference for political candidates and people in power who they favor. It's not bias. That's silly. It's like, you know, bias, like that's just like an opinion that you hold that maybe colors like your view of the world or whatever. This is not that at all. They are operating on behalf of a security state. This is an operation that they're a part of and that they're active in.
You are a journalist. I am not. I am one of those idiots. I'm not a journalist. You are. And so I'm trying to figure out how I would take it if I put in the time, I broke a story like this, which this is honestly, if we had a media that wasn't hostile to us, this is one of the big stories, not just of the year, of the decade. The president's son, hostile foreign ties, it looked really bad, and yet was squashed so hard by all the powers that be. What was that like as a journalist? You break the something that in a normal world would win you a Pulitzer and instead dismissed. Was that wild, hurtful, angering? What was it?
It was definitely, okay, so this is how I think about it. It was totally mind-blowing, of course, and infuriating in certain ways, of course, you know, because I wrote a story that I knew was newsworthy and was important. I mean, I actually wasn't a reporter, I was an editor, you know, so I'm looking at it as an editor and I'm like, this is the story of the election. People called it an October surprise. Like, it happened to have come out in October, but I published as soon as I could when I was able to verify and go with, like, to print with what I had. It wasn't like I timed this in any sort of political way. And then that being said, it's like, so I was infuriated with it. I was disgusted with it, obviously, as somebody who believes in like a free press and who was working at the time for a paper founded by Alexander Hamilton. You know, it's like, think about that. But, you know, yes, all of that for sure. But at the same time, it's like, I am not how I describe the rest of the media. I'm not a political operative, you know, so this story happened to have worked in Trump's favor. But first of all, I would have published it if it was Don Jr., 100%. Maybe I would have even gone harder because at least Joe Biden is obvious and open about the fact that he's a creature of the establishment and a globalist, whereas Trump would have been doing the opposite, like saying the opposite while he would have been doing that. Anyway, I would have published it no matter what. But the way I look at it is, like, I wasn't doing this for the Trump campaign. You know, I wasn't doing this to be political. I was publishing the story that I had, and it was about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. And then when they censored it, you know, that was a huge, like, moment in American consciousness, right? Because what we learned and what we're continuing to learn even till this day, 2 years later, is that we had an illusion of a social media platform and of a press that was private. And what it really was, which was revealed in all of this, was that no, this is a cutout for the federal government to decide what we can talk about and what we can read about. And now we've learned that Twitter was co-opted by the FBI, and that the FBI was the one that planted that seed for them to censor it months in advance when they knew that the laptop was going to come out, right? That's what we learned in the Twitter files. And then they were the ones that came up with the narrative also for people like Brian Stelter and Jeff Zucker at CNN to call this a right-wing conspiracy and Russian disinformation. That was all originated in the FBI. So as a journalist, I look at this, and yes, obviously it's infuriating to have your work undermined like that and censored like that when you wrote it for the American public to make an informed decision about voting, right? But at the same time, it's like, no, this exposed the real scandal, which is even bigger than the Biden family, much bigger than the Biden family. The real scandal is that the FBI is performing an operation internally, an intelligence operation internally. That is That is a scandal of historic proportions. It's bigger than the Bidens.
Support the First TV today and get instant access to exclusive specials like Who is Ron DeSantis, the history of FBI scandals, and America's worst presidents. Visit thefirsttv.com/support or download the First TV app to become a supporter and start watching today.